What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one I'm going to discuss some of the popular transfers ahead of Game Week 29, starting off with Martin Odegaard. And I want to begin by clarifying my position on Arsenal midfielders in general, because I've spoken a lot recently how for my own team, by the time we get to double game week 34, I'm aiming for that midfield five of Salah, Rashford, Fernandes, Mitoma and March. So by the time we get to 34, there's going to be no room for Arsenal midfielders in my team. Similarly, when I put the wildcard draft together yesterday, even though I said if you want an Arsenal midfielder, you should absolutely go for one, the draft I came up with didn't have any, right? And people seem to take that as though I now think that Arsenal midfielders are just complete rubbish and we should do everything we can to get rid of them at all costs before Leeds at home in game week 29. That's absolutely not the case, but we are at a stage of the season where there's lots of blank and double game weeks to be thinking about, but also people are playing their chips at different times and they've got different chips to manage the rest of the season, and that is going to drastically alter how you think about transfers and different players. So as an example, I wildcarded in game week 26 when Arsenal had a fixture run of Bournemouth at home, Fulham away, Palace at home in the blank game week 28, and then obviously Leeds at home in 29. So for me, three Arsenal players was absolutely essential on a game week 26 wildcard. I didn't even think about going for any less than three, but for someone that's wildcarded in 29, they might be looking at it thinking, well, there's no double game weeks for Arsenal for the rest of the season. There's other players that could outscore them this week, and then I'm also looking at future fixtures and future double game weeks. Another thing to think about is whether or not you've got a free hit left and whether or not you're playing it in game week 32 will also alter how you think about certain players. So if I'm looking at Martin Odegaard and I don't have a free hit left, well, I'm thinking over the next 4 game weeks, Leeds at home, Liverpool away, West Ham away and Southampton at home, it's not that bad. And even if I was to bring in someone like Bruno Fernandes that a lot of people are looking at, yes, he gains an extra fixture in 29, but because he blanks in 32, he loses one there. So over the next 4 game weeks, Arsenal and Man United players have the same number of fixtures. Now, obviously, you can use transfers to bring a player in, then get rid of them again, but you don't have unlimited transfers, so you've got to think about whether that's good or not for your team. So if I don't have a free hit, I'm looking at Odegaard, looking at Saka, thinking I probably would just keep hold of them because that Southampton at home game in 32 is great. If you do have a free hit and you are going to play it in 32, I think the landscape looks a little bit different. I'm thinking, okay, Leeds at home is a good fixture, but there are other midfielders I think will score more points this week. And then if you forget about the Southampton game, because you can bring 3 Arsenal players back, they've got Liverpool away, West Ham away, Man City away, and Chelsea at home. Now, I know what people are going to say. Arsenal are brilliant, they're top of the league, I fully agree. Their players are great value, I fully agree. They've scored loads of points, I fully agree, right? But if you were looking to bring in a player and you were trying to picture what that fixture run looks like, it doesn't look like Liverpool away, West Ham away, Man City away and Chelsea at home. So I think there is some merit to be discussing or thinking about getting rid of Arsenal midfielders this week. Not necessarily all of them, but at least one. So if you're asking me whether you should get rid of Odegaard, the question is, who are you bringing in? And if that person is Bruno Fernandes, then I think that move is worth it. And I think over 100,000 FPL managers have made a good transfer, because as good as they've been and as good value as they are, that doesn't matter if you have the money to spend on a different player. So obviously, value-wise, Bruno Fernandes doesn't really stack up against Odegaard because he's more expensive, but if you've got that cash to spend and it doesn't impact the rest of your team, it seems like a pretty good move. I know that Man United's double on paper is not great, but if I'm putting money on who scores more points this week out of Fernandes and Odegaard, or even Fernandes and Saka, my money's on the Man United man, even without Casemiro in the team. Then the fixtures in 30 and 31 are better as well. You've got the free hit, so that doesn't matter. In 33, Spurs away is not great, but for Arsenal, it's Man City away, the hardest fixture you can have all season. And then after that, obviously, Man United have got 2 more double game weeks to come. So I think you have to think about your own team. What chips have I played? What chips do I have left? And what do I think about the players that I could bring in instead? So are Arsenal midfielders like Odegaard absolutely essential to get rid of this week? No, definitely not. Leeds at home is a great single game week fixture. But if you can get a double game weeker in for this week, who's also better for the long term, or at least for the next 5 to 6 fixtures, that looks pretty good for me. So you've got to kind of think about it for your own team. I might sell one or both of my Arsenal midfielders. For another person, that might make absolutely no sense because you haven't got a free hit and you think the next 4 game weeks actually look pretty good. So I don't think that 100,000 people have made a mistake. It's all going to be very team dependent. And look at, Odegaard's underlying numbers. They are brilliant. 0.32 expected goals per 90, 0.26 expected assists, 5.7 points a match. This is an extremely good value FPL option, but there are lots of reasons why you could look to get rid of him this week. All right, let's talk about Harry Kane, who's had a very, very good FPL season so far. He's sitting on 182 points, the second highest scoring player in the game, and only 21 points behind Erling Haaland. And if you think about the way people talk about Haaland, like he's this absolute machine, we've never seen anything like it, he's destroying FPL, to be only 21 points behind after 28 game weeks, that feels pretty impressive. So Kane's had a good season, he's been really consistent, he's sitting at 6.5 points per match. Why are people thinking of selling him, right? And it's a similar situation to the Arsenal players, that you look at game week 29, Everton away is a perfectly good fixture for Kane. In a normal game week, you probably wouldn't be looking to sell him, but there are double game weeks for other players. So if you wanted to make a bigger move somewhere else, and for a lot of people that is Bruno Fernandes, I know I keep using him as an example, but a lot of people are going to think about bringing him in this week. If you need the funds, Kane could be that cash cow, and there's lots of double game week forwards that you could consider. So you've got Isak, Solanke, Watkins, Havertz. Some of you might even be thinking about Danny Ings. Either way, there's a lot of players with 2 fixtures that could outscore Kane and give you enough money to make a bigger upgrade elsewhere. So in those situations, it could be worth it. But like Odegaard, like Saka, you do not need to go out of your way to sell Harry Kane. And if you can get the other players, mostly double game week players that you want, while keeping him, then that is what I would do. Because straight away afterwards, you got 2 home fixtures. Brighton is not an easy game, but you'd always back Kane at home. And then it's Bournemouth at home in game week 31, where you could look at him and even think about him as a potential captain. Now, if Haaland is fit, then he's got Leicester at home that week. You're definitely going to captain him. But outside of Haaland and Kane, unless you're willing to go for kind of Rashford or Fernandes against Forest or Salah against Leeds, maybe an Arsenal player against West Ham, I guess. Spurs against Bournemouth at home is probably one of the best fixtures for game week 31. So if you're looking at your overall rank thinking, is there any weeks where I could go against Haaland? Don't get me wrong, he could smash Leicester. That might be one of those weeks. So there's definitely reasons to keep hold of him. I think if you're free hitting in 32, there's probably a few less reasons to be worried about it long term, because you could get him back in 32 if you wanted to anyway. Then it's Man United at home, Liverpool away. And essentially for most people, whether or not they think that right now, you're probably not going to be able to hold Kane through game week 34, because there's going to be other upgrades you want to make for double game week players that week. So that doesn't mean you have to sell him right now, but it is something to think about. He's not someone you're probably going to hold from now all the way until the end of the season. So I think Everton away is a good fixture. I know for my own team, if I do want Fernandes, one of Saka or Kane has to go, and I am tempted to sell him. It's just that Bournemouth at home fixture in game week 31. If everyone else is at least starting to consider getting rid of him, that might be a fixture I want to keep him before. But realistically, that's the only one where I'm kind of terrified is the wrong word, but a little bit scared of not owning him. Yes, I would want him for Everton, Brighton and Newcastle, but they're not as key as that Bournemouth at home fixture in game week 31. So if you need to downgrade him to make a bigger upgrade elsewhere, I think that could be worth it. But like Saka, like Odegaard, you do not have to go out of your way to sell him. He's perfectly fine to keep hold of. Alright, should you be buying Pervis Estupinan before Brighton's double in game week 29? Now, to be fair, on paper, it's a very good double game week. You've got Brentford at home and Bournemouth away. You would say there's at least a chance of 1 clean sheet there, plus attacking potential as well, because his underlying numbers are pretty good. You've got 0.03 expected goals per 90, 0.17 expected assists. That's pretty decent for a defender that only costs 4.8 million. So things look pretty good. I would say in general, if you're not already tripled up up on Brighton players for their kind of previous double game week they had in 27 as well, then the fixtures afterwards are not necessarily making them essential, right? They've got Spurs away, Chelsea away, especially for a defender, that's not great. Then it's a blank in game week 32. So although Brighton have got 4 double game weeks before the end of the season, and they look like good long-term holds, and as someone that's got 3, I'm definitely going to keep hold of all 3 of them. If you're not already there, I don't know if they're absolutely essential to bring in this week, but let's say you do want to go for a defender from Brighton. Should it be Estupinan, or should you just go for Lewis Dunk instead? And someone said in the comments for yesterday's video, whenever I mention Lewis Dunk, I always say he's a boring pick. And to be fair, he is just a good, solid FPL option. But compared to Estupinan, he is a little bit boring. But I do like him anyway. But let's stick with Estupinan. The thing that everyone has been talking about during the international break is whether or not he'll play that first game against Brentford, because he's had to travel to Australia to play for Ecuador, right? And if we look at the fixtures they've had, it's actually being played the second game at the time of recording. So they've already played the first game on the 24th of March. That was on Friday. They lost 3-1. They're currently in the 73rd minute. They're winning 2-1. And by the way, Estupinan scored a penalty. Let's get McAllister off penalties for Brighton. We need to get Estupinan on them instead. So that is the 73rd minute at 11:11 a.m. in UK time, right? So by the time that game's finished, 24 hours to get back, hopefully he will be back in Brighton by what, like Wednesday evening at the latest, maybe Thursday morning, and the game is on Saturday. Now, I've never travelled that far by plane. A lot of people have said it doesn't matter what luxury he's in, business class, first class, private plane, whatever, the amount of travel that takes is going to have kind of a detriment on whether or not he can play on Saturday. But to be fair, there's still a couple of days when he gets back, and it's not like Brighton have got lots of ready-made left-backs to play. So I'm actually thinking, given that that match is going to be done by like 11:30 UK time on Tuesday, there is a chance that he's going to play on Saturday. But if you're not someone that wants to take a risk, then you should probably just be looking at Lewis Dunk instead. Now, Estupinan did get brought off for Brighton in the FA Cup at half-time, I believe it was. And when De Zerbi was asked why, he simply said something like, because I thought Purvis would play better, which isn't necessarily a good indication of how he played, right? He must not have, I didn't watch that game, but he must not have played that great. I just don't think it's necessarily going to have an effect on him going forward, especially with the lack of options Brighton have in that position. I would say, though, that when you look at the rest of the fixtures that Brighton have got, and look, 4 double game weeks sounds great, but that also means a lot of fixture congestion. If I had to put money on one of the defenders getting a rest at some point over these fixtures they've got left, you probably would say it's more likely to be Estupinan than Dunk, and it's not really a position you want to use transfers on. So what I'm trying to say, and I say this as someone that owns Estupinan, so I'm really not trying to put people off, but if he does miss a game, you're probably not going to have a transfer to deal with that for next time. You're going to be in a position where, okay, he's missed the game, that's fine, but hopefully he'll play the rest. Oh, he's missed another game, well, that's fine, he's definitely going to play the rest. And you can get into that position, and because he's so attacking, you're never going to want to sell him. And it might be that the attacking potential makes up for any game that he misses anyway. It's just something to consider. If you're an FPL manager where as soon as he gets benched you're going to panic, you should probably just buy Lewis Dunk or a different defender instead, and just look at bringing them back in for kind of game week 33 onwards, where they've got Nottingham Forest away, a double in 34, and 2 more double game weeks to come after that. Just really quickly, just on the points per match, if we look at it so far, if I just go to Brighton instead of all players, there they are. He's actually at 3.6 compared to Dunk at 3. So you could make a case that even if he misses out 1 game, maybe, possibly 2 before the end of the season, the amount of bonus that he gets because of the amount of chances he's creating and his attacking potential as well definitely makes him better. So I'll leave it at this. If Estupinan plays the same amount of minutes as Dunk before the end of the season, I absolutely want Estupinan instead. It's just whether or not you're willing to take that risk. Whether or not he plays against Brentford at home, I don't know. I'm not an expert on travel for footballers and stuff like that, but the fact that he could be back by Wednesday evening and a few days to get reacclimatised to UK time, hopefully that would help. If you're an expert on travel to Australia, let me know in the comments below how it's going to affect him. Is he going to play against Brentford? And even if he doesn't, is he just good enough to score more points anyway? Possibly is, because those attacking numbers for 4.8 million are decent. So from one cheap defender to another one, let's quickly talk about Tyrone Mings. I was a bit surprised to see that he'd been transferred in by over 50,000 FPL managers, but I guess he did do pretty well in game week 28 and they have the double in 29, so that would have played a part. But when I thought about it a bit more, I don't know if he's that bad of a transfer in either way for someone that needs a really cheap defender. Obviously, if you've got like 5 odd million to spend, then you could get Luke Shaw. If you've got a spare Brighton slot, you can get Estupinan or Dunk. But if you've only got 4.3 or less to spend, there probably aren't a huge amount of better defenders out there that are absolutely nailed on and play for a decent side that can get you some clean sheets. The double in 29 is not great from a defensive point of view, and I would probably say there's not much of a chance of Villa getting a clean sheet in either game, but if they can nick one, the fixtures afterwards are pretty good. They got 3 home fixtures in 4, Nottingham Forest at home in 30, Newcastle at home in 31, Fulham at home in 33, and that might be a Fulham side without Mitrovic as well. We're still waiting to hear at the time of recording what the length of his suspension will be from the FA Cup game against Man United. So that's a pretty decent run. I wouldn't mind having to play him in any of those fixtures if I needed to. Obviously, he's a 4.3 million defender for a reason. He doesn't have a huge amount of goal threat. Villa aren't necessarily the team you look for clean sheets, but there are some decent fixtures. So if you don't need to play him, you can just bench him. You've got money to spend elsewhere on other moves because he's so cheap. And if you do need to play him in those games, it's not the end of the world. And if you are someone without a free hit, they've also got a fixture in 32. Now that's not going to be easy either to get a clean sheet in, Brentford away, but who knows, by then Tony might be suspended or banned or something like that as well. So I actually think things look pretty good for Aston Villa, where the way I would be looking at it is he's only 4.3 million. 30 to 33 are pretty good fixtures. Having a double in 29 is just a bonus. And if you can get something great, if he just comes out with 3 or 4 points, it's not the end of the world. And I think for 4.3 or less, there's not many other defenders I would look at. As a long-term pick for someone that you'd want to play regularly, then he's probably not it till the end of the season, because there's no more doubles for Villa after 29. It's Man United away in 34, another away game against Wolves, and then they finish the season with Spurs, Liverpool and Brighton. But again, he's so cheap you could just put him on the bench. You're only looking at him in the short term. Obviously, if you don't need him for any of those weeks where they got good fixtures, then try and buy someone else instead. But even though a lot of those transfers in are probably because I think he got 12 points in game week 28 and then they've got the double, I don't think it's that bad of a transfer if you need someone that cheap. Hopefully most of you don't and you can just look elsewhere, but if you do, Tyrone Mings is pretty decent. You can leave the video there, give it a like if you enjoyed it, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.